And now it's Boomer Life. Lifestyle ideas designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life with Sterling Fox.
Well, hello. Welcome to Boomer Life here on AM 650. This program is all about hearing as we welcome back our friends from Next Gen and Mainland Hearing in the persons of the president of the company. Mark Hambley is back in studio. Nice to see you again, Mark.
Oh, it's great to be back, Sterling.
It's been a few weeks, and you've been ably replaced by Dr. Ted Venema, the audiologist from the hearing company. Ted, good to see you again, as always.
Yep.
But we've got the tag team back with us in studio for a very good conversation to have. We're going to talk about hearing aids specifically. But, Mark, before we get to the nuts and bolts of our show and that subject matter, remind us a little bit about yourself and NextGen/Mainland Hearing, because this is not your first venture into the hearing business at all, is it?
No. As I mentioned at a previous show, Sterling, I sort of retired from a company called Island Hearing, which I started back in 1978, and with a group of wonderful people, very talented people, grew that company over about 30 years from a little single location in Victoria to 125 branches across the country, right out to PEI in Nova Scotia, and really we had a lot of fun doing it with some great people. Retired for about 2 years. Decided that golf and travel, etc., was not my forte. I enjoyed it while I had it, but I really wanted to get back and do something productive.
Got a little bored, did you, Mark?
I did, unfortunately.
Well,
fortunately.
For some, retirement is, man, I just can't wait to get out there. And for others, it's retire and do what?
Yes, exactly.
I got a feeling you took a trip, you played a few games of golf, and if you're anything like me, not very well. And
never golf long enough to get well,
And isn't that part of it? And that's what retirement's supposed to be. Well, now you can really work on your golf game. Well, yeah, and do what?
Yeah, exactly.
So you got back into the hearing business. Now, why did you particularly go back to where you had been before, given that you could have gone in any direction imaginable?
Well, I loved what I did. I really liked the difference that you make in this profession, in audiology and as a hearing instrument practitioner. I mean, I was an optician before I got into this profession. And you spent maybe about 20 minutes, half an hour with a typical client, ground their lenses, help them pick out a frame, and then you'd fit their glasses and they were out the door.
Right.
When I got into this profession, you're spending about 5 hours with an individual by the time you complete the testing, the case history, if they're a candidate for a hearing aid, going through the various options for them, helping them to choose one, and then the fitting process. And then there's hours of counseling, just helping them adapt and adjust to amplification again.
Right.
So
now,
you create wonderful relationships with people, and I love working with the elderly. They're a wonderful group of people, very genuine, very, very sincere. There's no pretenses. You're past that youth stage of your life, and you're just who you are. They're great people to work with.
Are you doing anything differently playing the game this time around, Mark, than you did in the first round, which was incredibly successful?
Yes.
What did you learn from that round that you're reapplying perhaps in a slightly different way this time with Next Gen and Mainland?
Well, one of the things that we were very successful with Island Hearing that we really transported into the Mainland and Next Gen group is that we have a very strong passion for helping people improve the quality of their lives through better hearing. So we design our whole value proposition, our offering to the public. We design it around making that difference in their lives. And so a lot of it is related to that relationship that trust that you have to build with that individual to help them make that adjustment to amplification and work with them. It takes a fair amount of adjustment from not being able to hear as well as you'd like to, because that may have come to you over maybe 15, 20 years, and so gradually, so incrementally, that you haven't noticed it, you know.
You,
And then
you become a
suddenly,
pretty good lip reader in the process,
yeah,
but you've managed to cope somehow.
yes, it's like, you know, I sort of use this analogy. It's like taking someone who has lived 20 years out in the boonies in Alaska and then picking them up, you know, with all that quiet and, you know, nature and, you know, that sort of thing, and then picking them up by a helicopter and then dropping them in the middle of New York City,
right,
and asking them to adjust. You know, I
sure.
mean, it takes a lot of time to
right.
be able to adjust and adapt to the level of noise, even more so today than when I first started.
Right. And before we get to Ted, one other quick question. It's Next Gen and Mainland Hearing, Mark. Why the two names, and will they ever become one?
Indeed, they will. You know, the whole plan is to amalgamate the two brands, and so that they'll be known as Next Gen Hearing in the coming years. I think we just want to be very careful here. It's amazing, you know, the people in Mainland have done such an amazing job. People associate that care and that quality of care to the brand, and so we want to be very careful how we introduce Next Gen. And right now, we say Mainland Hearing, an affiliate of Next Gen.
Right.
And so we'll actually amalgamate the two companies, and we'll put on there Next Gen Hearing, formerly Mainland Hearing, just to make sure people don't or aren't concerned that they've lost the very people that they've grown to know and love.
Because part of this, a big part of this, and Ted Venema is also with us, and your turn finally. But part of what Mark is talking about, you've mentioned many times, as an audiologist, you do have to simply hit the brakes and spend time with individuals, and there is no substitute for time spent,
That's
is
right.
there?
You form a relationship. And in my clinic, the thing I enjoyed the most was the clients. It wasn't the technology per se; it was the interaction with the individuals, and they still remember me. You know, I've gone into that office and hey, where's Ted? You know, and
right.
you have a connection that you build with them because it's a matter of trust. You're fitting them with a device, and as Mark says, you're taking them out of the boonies of dead quiet or a relative state of being that they've come used to. Hearing loss is insidious. It creeps up, as he said, over years, and the person gets used to living in his or her world that way and lip reading, as you were saying, relying on, and then suddenly having to make them round a corner and use a piece of technology. And today hearing aids are digital. They're highly technical, and they require explanation, and it's taking time to explain things so they get a realistic expectation. And they get a realistic idea of the limitations and successes of hearing aids. Right. Because it's a mixed bag, and it takes a lot of counseling and a lot of explaining, and you have to love people. And that's a big part of it.
One thing that Ted has pointed out to us on many occasions already, Mark, is the way we humans react to hearing loss. Now, you and I, Mark and I, are wearing glasses. Ted isn't today. But, Mark, you and I both probably went to the eye doctor at one point or another because things were getting a little fuzzy. Yep. And it just wasn't working out. We needed some assistance. Yep. So we swallowed our pride and took an eye test and got some specs. Yep. Well, you know, that starts to happen to our hearing. Yep. But we can still see fine. Yep. We can still see everything. And while our audio world is diminishing, the rest of our life is still flourishing. Yep. So we decide, rather than going to a doctor and having ourselves checked up and maybe getting some assistance, we decide we'll just suck it up and cope. Yep. So now, talk to us, Mark, about the numbers of people. Now, Ted's mentioned this in the past. Yep. From the point in which in our lives we hear we hear less, all of a sudden we know, because it's our body and those are our ears, our hearing is going. Yep. Somehow or another, we decide, we elect not to do anything. We consciously go, oh, no big deal, I'll manage. Yes. Yep. Now, from that point to the point where we even go get a hearing test, what are the percentages of people who do anything?
Well, it's about 20% that actually, right around that area, 18 to 25, somewhere in that area of people that actually take action, and usually, according to Dr. Kochkin, who is sort of works for the Better Hearing Institute, and he's done enormous amounts of research on satisfaction levels of people who wear hearing aids.
Right.
And typically, as he says, the individual, by the time they're first told they have a hearing loss, will put it off anywhere from 5 to 7 years before they actually do something.
Yeah, you
about
pointed
it.
Well-established research.
That's
Yes,
right.
it's-
Yes, Ted's 5-year minimum almost.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Oh well. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
I'll get around to that soon.
Yeah.
And soon turns out to be anywhere between 5 and 7 years.
Absolutely, 5 to 7 years. And one of the major barriers to entry, as Dr. Kochton points out, is the cost, which leads us into our topic today, isn't it? Really, why do hearing aids cost so much, right? So cost is a big barrier to people actually trying hearing aids. And really, I think a lot of that is misplaced. It's misplaced understanding of really what's available to them today, because hearing aids, although there's no subsidy by the provincial government for seniors, it's not covered under your medical plan, unlike Ontario that provides.
Yeah, BC's kind of weird. We're kind of we're the back end of the bus on this business.
Absolutely.
We'll get into these details in a few minutes here, friends. But your province, our province, isn't exactly the most generous when it comes to helping people with hearing issues.
That's correct. Unlike Ontario, that provides $500 per ear subsidy for someone who wants to purchase hearing aids.
I suppose the thing that's most baffling to the observer would be, once it's determined that you have a hearing loss. It's like your vision loss. You know when your eyes are going, you can't see as well. You know when your hearing's going, you can't hear as well. So then we the part that's most baffling to me is a hearing test is free.
Yes.
There's no charge to find out where you're at. Maybe you're imagining hearing difficulties. Well, it costs absolutely nothing to find out whether you're bang on or whether you're fading out. That's free.
And that's good information. I mean, if you've got a hearing test done and the results explained properly, you're a whole lot better armed and ready to face what you may or may not need in terms of hearing aids.
Right, and so far,
it's
cost you absolutely zero. So is it the thought, Mark, of having to fork over the dough for hearing aids that is the intimidating factor that causes people to stay away?
For some, Sterling, that is the absolute case. For others, it's stigma. It's unfortunately, hearing aids are associated with aging. And as a result, people tend to want to put it off because they don't want to be seen as an aging individual, right? But also, I think it's important to understand, as an optician, an ex-optician, is, when I fit glasses, people would come in after you put the frame on saying, God, I'm having a heck of a time getting used to these big black circles around my eyes and looking at them. And if you wore bifocals, it's like, God, I'm tripping over curves,
Sure.
that sort of thing.
Right.
So, but we say, you know what, it's worth the sacrifice because I'm tired of struggling to read the phone book or reading small print. So there's a real urgency to do something about it.
Right.
Where hearing loss, we don't relate to things like we do with our eyes. With hearing loss, unlike glasses, you're relating to people. So it's about communication.
You can see vision loss. You see the white cane, you see a person. People believe what they see.
Right.
You can't see hearing loss. It gets swept under the rug. Teachers will think a child is willfully not listening, or they'll think an aging adult has just got dementia and is losing it. And people, they just don't see that actually, well, maybe they're just not hearing everything.
Right.
It's an invisible sense, and people believe. I think there's a psychological difference to the approach that people. Also, Elton John wears glasses as big as God. I mean, it's fashionable to wear glasses.
Oversized.
I mean, but not hearing aids, as Mark said. They've got a stigma to them.
Right.
That's all. It means you're getting. He's losing it. You're wearing hearing aids.
Ted mentioned something rather interesting that you and I, over a cup of tea before we started this program, you showed me some. You shared a news story that you saw on CBC television a while back. And it was a researcher, perhaps the doctor that you've already referred to, Mark, who is starting to connect the dots. Hearing research is starting to connect the dots between hearing loss and dementia.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that. How is that going, and what provoked the research?
Well, I mean, I think there's been some suspicion for some time that because there's this old adage, use it or lose it, and it's when you're not hearing, you're not stimulating areas of the auditory system, which obviously stimulates areas of the brain, right? So if you're not getting that stimulation, what impact is that happening on your overall cognitive process, you see? And so I think with that suspicion, that research occurred. And Dr. Lim, and there's a Dr. Paul Mick as well, who's an otologist in Kelowna, who worked with Dr. Lim with this research. And he did an enormous amount of research in this whole area and saw a strong association between hearing loss and the occurrence of dementia.
And Ted, you've mentioned this in the past as well, this research.
Yeah, there's a hearing loss. I mean, as Mark was saying, vision is relating to things. Hearing relates to people. I mean, Helen Keller said that.
Yeah.
And it's if loneliness, isolation, lack of interaction with other social beings, what good is that going to do to someone who really truly does have dementia?
Right.
Nada. It's terrible.
Right.
So if anything, it aggravates and aids and abets.
It certainly couldn't improve anything.
Exactly.
No,
so I mean,
absolutely.
there as Mark was saying, there's an association. It's not really a cause-linked thing.
Right.
But you think about it. It's what people used to say about cigarettes and cancer. It's they were.
It started out there was an association,
and
then the research continued, and more research eventually proved the cause and effect relationship there.
Absolutely.
So that's where this research is clearly heading. One would expect.
Yep. And also Dr. Mick is involved with an enormous research project in Canada, really to do further research on this very topic. So I'm waiting with bated breath to find out the results of that research, which will take a while. It's going to be quite some time before it's finished. But I think there'll be more validity to that association as we move forward here.
Well, as this information becomes available, will you share it with us, Mark? Because I'm finding it absolutely fascinaking, and it really does. And when you think about it, just even for a minute, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
And even in the smaller world of the individual, think of the lights, the eyes lighting up. When you're finally part of the conversation.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just the joy of being able to communicate more effortlessly and effectively and not being isolated. Just down to that, the human good thing.
This episode of Boomer Life is all about hearing, and we have our friends from Next Gen and Mainland Hearing, Mark Hambley and Dr. Ted Venema in studio, and lots more still ahead. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on AM 650.